meat eating. Then Mahamati, the great bodhisattva, having questioned the Blessed One with verses, also entreated, "Let the Blessed One, the able, perfectly enlightened Buddha, indicate to me the merit and fault in eating meat, whereby I and other great bodhisattvas in the future and present may teach people who are habituated to the ways of flesh-eating beings, eager to eat meat, so that they give up craving for flavor, and such that meat-eating people become indifferent to craving for taste. And, wishing to partake of the taste of truth, with love for all beings as for one's only child, they may acquire great friendliness toward one another. And having attained it, after having done the practices in all the stages of bodhisattvas, may quickly realize perfect enlightenment. Or, having come to rest in the stages of hearers or solitary illuminates, may they gradually approach the stage of the realized. Eating meat is opposed even by other philosophers with wrongly stated principles, who preach annihilation or eternity proposing being or non-being, and they themselves don't eat it. All the more in the case of the perfectly enlightened one who relishes only compassion, the guided leader of the world. In your teaching, could one eat meat oneself and not oppose its consumption? Very well. Then, Blessed One, sympathizer with all worlds, who sees all beings as like his only child, great compassionate one, out of sympathy please teach me the merits and faults in meat eating, so that I and other bodhisattvas may teach people accordingly. Quote, the Blessed Ones said, then listen, Mahamati, and take it to heart accurately and aptly. I will tell you. Quote, very well, Blessed One. So saying, the great bodhisattva Mahamati listened to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this to him. For countless reasons, Mahamati, no kind of meat should be eaten by a bodhisattva, soul of compassion. I will just mention some of them. Here in this world, Mahamati, of being flowing in common over such a long period of time. There is no being having taken on form that has not been mother or father, brother or sister, son or daughter, partners, or kinfolk, family, and friends. How can the flesh of that relative or friend from another life, born as a wild animal, domestic animal, or bird, flesh born of the being of all living creatures, be eaten by a great bodhisattva aspiring to Buddhahood, wishing to identify with all beings? Even the demoniacal, hearing of this benevolence of the teaching of the realized ones, become compassionate protectors, who have given up meat eating. How much the more people who love virtue. Thus, Mahamati, in order to cultivate the conception of all beings as one's only child, the conception of all those different forms of existence as one's own kith and kin, meat is not to be eaten at all. For a bodhisattva, soul of compassion, meat is not to be eaten. Even as an exception, Mahamati, all meat is unsuitable for consumption by someone with the conduct of a bodhisattva. For dog, mule, camel, horse, bull, human, and other kinds of flesh unsuitable for people's consumption are sold as edible mutton in market stalls for profit. Even for that reason, Mahamati, meat is not to be eaten by bodhisattvas. Because it is produced from semen and blood, too, Mahamati, meat should not be eaten by a bodhisattva, out of a desire for purity. And because it causes anxiety in beings, Mahamati, a practicing bodhisattva wishing friendliness of beings should not eat any meat at all. Just as dogs are scared to death on seeing flesh-eating people like hunters, butchers, and fishers, even at a distance, thinking, they'll kill us too. In the same way, Mahamati, other small creatures living in the air, earth, or water who, even far from the sight of a meat-eater, smelling the demon-like human odor with a keen sense of smell, quickly move away, as when in danger of death. For that reason too, Mahamati, because it causes anxiety, meat should not be eaten by a practicing bodhisattva abiding in great friendliness, as it is enjoyed by unworthy people and has a bad smell. Because it makes for a bad reputation too, Mahamati, and being shunned by civilized people, meat should not be eaten by a bodhisattva. Civilized people eat the food of seers, Mahamati, not food of flesh and blood. For this reason too, meat should not be eaten by a bodhisattva. To protect the minds of many people, and seeking to avoid slander of the teaching, a bodhisattva, soul of compassion, should not eat meat. As it is, Mahamati, there are in the world those who speak ill of the teaching. Is there any austerity in them, or religious quality? Disregarding the foods of the seers of yore. Bellies full of meat like carnivores, they go around this world scaring the small creatures living in the air, earth, and water, terrorizing living beings. Austerity is lost to them, their religious character is ruined. They have neither duty nor discipline. Those with hostile minds slander the teaching in many ways like this. Therefore, even to protect the minds of many people, and seeking to avoid slander of the teaching, Mahamati, meat should not be eaten by a bodhisattva, soul of compassion. Because of unpleasant likeness to the foul odor of a corpse too, Mahamati, meat should not be eaten by a bodhisattva. For the smell of the flesh of a dead human being burning is no different from the smell of the flesh of other animals. The bad smell of both kinds of burning flesh is the same. Hence, Mahamati, no meat should be eaten by a practicing bodhisattva desiring purity, since it also obstructs the learning, practice, and liberation of those staying in burning grounds, of yogis practicing the disciplines in the wilderness, sleeping and sitting in remote haunted places, holders of spells abiding in friendliness wishing to accomplish spiritual knowledge, seeing how it also creates obstacles to the accomplishment of all disciplines of family sons and family daughters who have set out on the great vehicle. Meat should not be eaten at all by a bodhisattva, who wishes well for self and others. Because it produces relish based on consciousness of objects with form too, no meat should be eaten by a bodhisattva, soul of compassion, who identifies with all beings. Considering that even celestials shun this, Mahamati, meat should not be eaten at all by a bodhisattva, soul of compassion. Considering that one's own mouth will be extremely bad smelling all one's life here, Mahamati, a bodhisattva, soul of compassion, should not eat meat of any kind. One sleeps uncomfortably, awakens uncomfortable, and has bad and frightening dreams. And demons steal the energy of one staying alone in an empty house, living in solitude. They are fearful, sometimes frightened, afraid for no reason. And one knows no measure in food, nor sees to the proper seasoning, cooking, and nutrition of what he eats and drinks. One comes to have a stomach that is a toxic cause of disease filled with worms and bugs, and is frequently plagued by illness. And one doesn't see anything wrong with this. And while calling it eating the flesh of one's child as if it were medicine. Mahamati. How indeed could I permit my disciples to take food of flesh and blood? To which uncivilized people resort and which civilized people reject, which bears many faults and eliminates many virtues, is not prescribed by seers, and is not suitable. I have permitted. On the other hand, Mahamati, all food partaken of by civilized people and rejected by uncivilized people, which bears many good qualities and is free of many ills, food prescribed by all seers of yore, considered suitable. Namely rice, barley, wheat, beans, lentils, and the like, prepared with clarified butter, sesame oil, honey, raw sugar, molasses, syrup, sugar cane juice, and the like. However, Mahamati, this prescribed food is not related for some deluded people in the future preaching various alternatives in discipline. influenced by the habits of meat-eaters, in whom a craving for taste has been established. Rather, Mahamati, I tell great bodhisattvas who have worked for previous Buddhas, who have sent down roots of good, who are faithful without changing, multitudes of successors to the lineage of the Buddha, family sons and family daughters, without attachment to body, life, or property, who are not greedy for taste, who do not have eager appetites, who have unfailing compassion, who want to approach identification with all beings, who see all beings with affection as for an only child. Long ago in the past, Mahamati, there was a king named Sinhasodasa. He indulged so much in eating meat that in pursuing his paramount devotion to craving for taste he even ate human flesh. And because of that he was abandoned by his friends, counselors, kith and kin, and his whole set, not to mention the citizens and country folk. So, deserted by his own kingdom, he suffered a great calamity on account of meat. Even Indra, in a former existence before attaining celestial lordship, because of the fault of habituation to eating meat, in the form of a hawk chased down Vishvakarman in the form of a dove, who then placed himself on a scale. Whereat King Shibi, pitying an innocent being, was greatly distressed. So even one who has become a celestial lord through many lifetimes of practice, Mahamati, has brought trouble on self and others. How much more everyone else? Princes of others who had become kings. Mahamati. Kings who were taken away by horses and while wandering in forests had sexual intercourse with a lioness out of fear for their lives and produced offspring from cohabitation with lions. The princes beginning with Kalmashapada, were meat-eaters even after becoming kings, because of the harmful habit of eating meat in their former lives. Here in this life as well, Mahamati, even in a village of 7 houses, horrible goblins and demonesses who eat human flesh appear seeking it fanatically out of ardent longing for a lot of meat. And at the end of a life, Mahamati, due to such effort for the taste of meat they are caused to fall into the wombs of carnivores like lions, tigers, leopards, wolves, hyenas, wildcats, jackals, owls, and so on. Into even more horrible wombs such as those of demons who are even more voracious flesh-eaters, where it is difficult for the fallen even to reach a human womb, let alone emancipation. These and other bad consequences arise from meat-eating, Mahamati, especially in those who are habituated to it. And there are even more virtues from giving it up. But ignorant ordinary people, Mahamati, are not aware of these and other faults and merits. Seeing such merits and faults, I say no meat is to be eaten by a bodhisattva, soul of compassion. And if, Mahamati, no one ever ate meat, then they wouldn't kill for that purpose. For most innocent living beings are slaughtered for profit, few for other reasons. It is abominable, Mahamati, that in the over-eagerness of craving for flavor even human flesh is eaten by humans, not to mention the flesh of other living creatures such as animals and birds. Most of this is killed in nets and traps for that purpose, by deluded people afflicted with craving for the taste of meat. As fowlers, herders, fishermen, and so on slaughter innocent creatures of the air, earth, and water in many ways for the sake of profit. And these bitter, cruel-hearted, demoniacal, ruthless people have no concept of living beings as living beings. As they are killing and eating them, they feel no compassion. And there is no ground on which meat is suitable for me to permit to disciples, be it that it has not been prepared by them, at their behest, or especially for them. But in the future, Mahamati, there will be deluded people who, having gone forth into my teaching and claiming to be Buddhists, wearing the trademark of the brown-red garment, their intelligence destroyed by false thinking, preaching various alternative disciplines, attached to the notion of a real body, obsessively craving for flavor, will string together sophisms rationalizing meat eating. And they will think it proper to make an unfounded false accusation against me. Concocting this and that purpose and motive, they will say, for this purpose, on this account. Eating meat has been permitted by the Blessed One as suitable. It is mentioned among prescribed foods too, and indeed it has been eaten by the realized One himself. But in no scripture has it been approved for indulgence, Mahamati, nor is it mentioned among prescribed foods as suitable. If, Mahamati, I wanted to permit it, or if it were proper for my disciples to indulge in it, I would not have forbidden all meat eating to yogis abiding in friendliness, practitioners of yoga staying in cemeteries, to family sons and family daughters who have set forth on the great vehicle, in order to cultivate the conception of all beings as one's only child. But I have in fact forbidden it. Here, Mahamati, all meat is forbidden to family sons and family daughters who have set out on all the vehicles. To forest-dwelling yogis staying in graveyards, abiding in friendliness, practitioners of yoga, in order to accomplish all discipline, for the purpose of cultivating the perception of all beings as one's only child. Combining a collection of disparate passages in the record of teaching confined to measures suitable to the states of students, 3 at most are not explicitly forbidden. Beyond that, even 10 kinds of meat from natural death are prohibited. But here in this scripture, all is forbidden, anyway, anyhow, with no accommodation at all. Hence, Mahamati, I have not assented, do not assent, and will not assent, to anyone's meat eating. To eat meat is unsuitable, I say, Mahamati, for those who have left secular society. And even if they think it proper to make a false accusation against me, Mahamati, saying that even the realized one eats meat, for other deluded persons surrounded by the obstacles of the ills of their own doing, that will be a long night of hellfire, without meaning and to no avail. For civilized disciples, Mahamati, do not eat the food of primitive people. How indeed could food of meat and blood be suitable? For my disciples, solitary illuminates and bodhisattvas eat for truth, not for enjoyment. How much more the realized ones? For the realized ones as embodiments of reality, Mahamati, are sustained by the consumption of truth, not bodies for enjoyment, and not sustained by eating for enjoyment. They have vomited out all habits of craving and possessiveness for worldly amenities, are freed of all the bad habits of the afflictions, have completely liberated intelligence and insight, all-knowing and all-seeing, greatly compassionate ones who look upon all beings like an only child. So, Mahamati, being one who perceives all beings as an only child, how could I permit disciples to eat the flesh of my only child? How, indeed, could I eat it myself? There is no basis, Mahamati, for the statement that I allowed disciples to eat it, or ate it myself. So it is said, alcohol, meat, and onions should not be eaten, great sage, by bodhisattvas, great people, victorious heroes speaking. Enjoyed by the uncivilized, foul-smelling, and a cause of ill repute, meat is the food of carnivores, I say, not to be eaten, great sage. You should realize what ills are in meat eating, Mahamati, what faults are in eating it and what merits in abstaining. Because of kinship, because of injury, because of originating in semen and blood. A practitioner should avoid meat, which frightens creatures. Meats and onions and sundry alcoholic drinks. Red garlic and garlic too, let the practitioner always avoid. One should give up anointment with oil, and not sleep on a bed of nails. A state of great terror to the beings in the spaces, from their space. Arrogance arises from eating. Expectation of advantage comes from arrogance. Born of expectation of advantage is passion. Hence one should not indulge. From expectation of advantage, passion is born. The mind is deluded by passion. Becoming accustomed to a state of delusion, one is never liberated in life. For the sake of gain, a being is killed. Money is given for the meat. Both of those evil acts result in terrible hells. Any moron who eats meat in violation of the word of the sage is designated in Buddhism as a destroyer of the welfare of two worlds. Those evildoers go to the most horrible hell. In agonizing, terrifying hells, meat-eaters are tormented. As for pure meat with 3 limitation: not specially prepared, not requested, not ordered. There is no such thing. So one should not eat meat. A practitioner should not eat meat. It has been censured by me and all Buddhas. Beings eating each other are born as carnivorous species. Stinking, contemptible, and even insane, one is born. In families of butchers and hunters, and among outcasts, again and again. And from a demonic womb one is born in a meat-eating family. And that lowest of men is born in the wombs of goblins and wildcats. In the Hastakaksha, Mahamati, Nirvana, Angulimalika, and the Lankavatara Sutras, meat is rejected by me. It is censured by Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and listeners. If one eats it shamelessly, madness always occurs. But one may be born among Brahmins, or in a family of yogis, with wisdom and wealth too, by giving up meat and so on. With doubts about what is seen and heard, one should avoid all meat. Thinkers born in meat-eating families do not understand. Just as passion is an impediment to liberation, so are such as meat and alcohol an impediment. In the future, deluded preachers who eat meat will say meat is mentioned by Buddha as proper and blameless. Meat eaten as medicine is also like the flesh of one's child. Let the yogi treat a piece of meat with proper revulsion. For those who abide in friendliness, it is always censured by me in every way. One will join the company of lions, tigers, wolves, and the like. Hence one should not eat meat, which scares people, because it is inconsistent with the teaching of emancipation. This is the trademark of the civilized.